Hi, my name is Clare and I'm the mother of 3 teenagers with FASD.
I'm Jessica, a PhD researcher specialising in educational interventions for children with FASD.
And together we are the hosts of Spotlight on FASD, the UK's first podcast dedicated to shining a spotlight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorders.
FASD is a condition caused by prenatal alcohol exposure that affects hundreds of thousands of children across the UK.
And we're here to bring these conversations out of the shadows and make sure that no one living with FASD feels alone. Hi and welcome back to the next episode of Spotlight on FASD. This week we are in conversation with, that sounds really posh, we're in conversation with the lovely Ailsa. Ailsa is a teacher. Ailsa is an FASD education advisor. Ailsa is a glorious woman, and probably most relevantly, Ailsa is the mother of a gorgeous little boy with FASD. So welcome to the podcast, Ailsa. It's lovely to talk to you.
Wow, quite an introduction, Claire. Thanks for that.
I thought that was quite impressive. I liked it. So yeah, we invited you on because we all mix in the same world. Ailsa and I met. So I think when I think of you, I always think of the importance of peer support.
Oh, totally.
And like peer support is like it sounds like something that's a bit crap. Peer support. It doesn't sound anywhere near as important or as vital as it is, does it? It's like a lifeline. So we, like every parent or carer of a child or young person with FASD, there is kind of no formal support or very little formal support out there, certainly when we were starting our journey. So you go online, you look to find your tribe, you look to find your people. And so we instantly could tell on an online support group that we had the same, certainly the same sense of humour, a little bit of a dark sense of humour. We do laugh our way through a lot of the horrific moments, but we had the same viewpoint, I think, on a lot of things. So we would always comment on each other's things, and then we met in the flesh at a conference. It was Adoption UK's very first FASD
2018, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was in Edinburgh. Yeah. Was it in Edinburgh? Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's where you live. So we met then, and then we just became friends, and we've always just kind of you weave in and out of each other's worlds when it comes to FASD. We kind of both work in that area now, and you do work with Jess, and we all do work together, and we just thought it was a no-brainer to get you, because you are so you are right on the cold face of it. You are absolute hands-on. The COVID has meant that you have had to school your little boy when you
did number 3 at the moment.
On round number 3 now, and all that. That did make my blood run cold a little bit when I seen that, thinking like, oh, I don't.
I actually did sit in the car and have a wee great. Yeah. So for those who don't know, my son's school has been closed because there's been a COVID outbreak. So he is currently homeschooling for I don't know how long.
And people would probably think like, oh well, you're a teacher, so like that must be like easy for you. Yeah. But then it's like we're in FASD world, so nothing is straightforward. So
and also I'm a high school English teacher. I don't teach 8-year-olds.
Especially now, and it's so difficult though, isn't it? Because it's just that's your mom, that's not your role at all.
Yeah.
No, he knows you're a teacher, that's not your role, so it's so tricky. But we wanted to talk to you about I think I've often wondered, it must be really difficult not to reflect back on your teaching career and just think of all of the kids who you have dealt with, who you absolutely now know were living with FASD.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think there must be moments where you think, oh, I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe I expected that of them, or that, but then also I think the way you are with Archie, I think that naturally comes from, because I always feel like you are a naturally therapeutic parent, and some people are, some people aren't. You can always learn it, but I found that I was naturally quite a therapeutic parent, and you are as well. So I think you must have made a massive impact on so many kids' lives, so many kids, without even really being aware that you were doing it. Just the way you naturally are and how nurturing you are. And I've seen things on Facebook when some of your old students, and so you can see what they all thought of you.
They're lovely. They're lovely.
Adored as a teacher, you can see that. And I think, I think we do have to talk about the fact that you were a teacher. You absolutely loved your job.
Adored my job. Absolutely adored my job.
Brilliant at your job. You had no intention of not doing your job any longer, but parenting a child with FASD has meant
it becomes untenable. You can't do it. Yeah.
That you've had to, and I think this is. I was reading an article today about a fellow SEN parent, and she was talking about social isolation. She was talking about how she's looked back and realised how isolated her life has become over the past 3 or 4 years without realising it. And it's like a protection mechanism, isn't it? You cut off the things that you know you can't do anymore because it makes things easier for you and for your children. And the same happened to me as well. Sadly, one of the first things often to go is your career. Yeah. And it's devastating, and you're allowed to be devastated about it.
Yeah.
Because I absolutely loved my job. I love what I do now, but having a job that I went away to was like, that was my respite. I'm just being a mum of 3 small children. That was my respite, and I loved it. And it's a huge adjustment, and you're allowed to, and I don't know. I think I was about to say there. I think I was about to say like, oh, and I'm really, really blessed to be able to do it. But actually, I didn't feel like it wasn't I don't want to work anymore because I want to just completely dedicate all my time to bringing up my children. It wasn't that. It was because I was getting to my desk at work, and within 15 minutes there was a phone call.
There's a phone call, yeah.
I had to drive 40 minutes back, and I knew that I couldn't then get back home, and then I'm not going to be able to get back to pick the other 2 up, so I'm just to take all 3 out now, and they'd only been in school for an hour and a half, and I had, so it's, it's something that I don't ever regret it. It was probably the best thing I've ever done for my kids. Definitely the best thing I've ever done for my kids, and for my sanity, although that's a fine balance as well. Round the clock, with them round the clock being everything for them. So yeah, I just think we'll have to acknowledge that it's not always it's something that we often have to do, and it's a decision that's out of our hands.
Yeah. And I think people who are on the outside of that kind of go, they almost sanctify you. They're almost like, well, you're such a good person, you're such a saint, blah blah blah. And I just want to go, no, I didn't want to stop work, And for me, because I went on career break and it was supposed to be 10 months, and I didn't go back, and it's been I should probably, I guess, have just gone, right, I'm resigning. Because for me, it's been a long, slow, drawn out, I guess, grieving process of leaving that person. And that, when you parent kids with FASD, it's rewarding. It's rewarding in its own way, but you quite often doubt yourself. You quite often doubt what you're doing. You quite often think, am I making any impact at all? Am I making this worse? Whereas when you're in a classroom, you can see the progression, you can see the kids, you know that you make a difference. And I guess the two-way relationship between you and a class, and you and kids that you're teaching and you're getting to know, there's more immediate feedback. I think with our kids there is feedback, but it's in a different way, and it's over a far longer time period, so I think walking away from that is often a big thing for parents.
It is definitely. It definitely is. And I think we're kind of, I know we wanted to talk about like a lot, we want to talk about the positives because we do try and keep this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it would be remiss of me, certainly as a fellow mother who has been left with no other choice than to walk away from a career that she loved. I think it has to be acknowledged, and we wouldn't be, you know, there's absolutely no shame in it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a very brave thing that we kind of took on the chin and just did. But that's not to say that like we don't miss it and we don't miss that old life and grieve that old life. It doesn't make us love our kids any less or want to be with them any less. But it is a hard thing to do. So I think we want to know. I was trying to think of some questions to ask, and I think the top question I always want to know whenever I start and get to know a teacher or an education professional and they start and learn more and more about FASD, I always want to know what would be like their top, not top tips, but what would be the top things that they would pass on to anyone who didn't know very much about FASD, who was about to walk into a classroom and deal with a child with FASD. What would be the first thing, or like if you had like 30 seconds to say this is what you need to know, what would it?
Do you know, because I was like totally prepared as a teacher. It's the opposite to the way we live our lives now, where it's quite often responding to things. I would say do your homework beforehand. So know the kid, because the basis of everything, and it doesn't matter whether your child has FASD, autism, ADHD, whatever in a classroom, is you know that child and you have a relationship with that child, because the relationship is the basis of everything. And if you know what makes them happy, if you know their strengths, if you know when they need movement break, if you know that they're prone to sensory overload, you know, you can know all of that stuff as a professional, and you can bring that into building that relationship with them. The relationship is the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter. You know, we're all humans. We have interaction with each other, and the basis of that nurture and learning has to be from a place of safety.
And do you think from so dealing with other kids with FASD, but also with your son, something that I've learned, so that the relationship is vital, and also the nurturing side of it, yes. But what I've found is they need someone who is completely in control, like somebody who is not outwardly controlling, but somebody who is absolutely confident in what they are doing and in control. Because if they sniff out nerves
or weakness or prevarication, they're on it.
Then that will will come across as probably challenging behaviour, or you know, some very silly behaviour, but actually it's fear. It's fear, and I think that's
something I keep saying to school at the moment. You know, we're on our 4th teacher this year. We've moved classroom, we're on different, you know, change of learning assistant, we're about to make another transition going up a school year, and I'm getting communications home going, he's very cheeky, he's argumentative, he won't do what he's told, and I'm kind of like, he's looking for boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's what kids do. They seek out boundaries to know that they're secure. And you, as a teacher, would say you don't need to be heavy-handed in applying those boundaries, but they do need to be consistent. They need to be pointed out. You can do it with a smile, and you can say, we'll do this, and then we'll do this. Now, then, you do what you need to do, then you do a little bit of this. But I would say that's part of the relationship. That's building that relationship is having those secure boundaries, the same way as you do as a parent, where they do feel cared for, they do feel nurtured, but they also feel completely secure because they know exactly where they are and what's going to happen.
So I think traditionally in education, boundaries equals discipline.
Consequences.
Isn't it? Discipline, consequences. And we know, and unless you understand FASD and unless you live with it and you see it all unfold, when, you know, and I've been having this conversation with someone who's been dealing with one of my children, when, you know, well, I'm kind of going to dangle a carrot and then that'll be like the reward at the end of this. Like, no, it's not going to work, because there's no, like, and to try and get somebody to understand that quite often that part of the brain development, that bit didn't happen. There's like, that little bridge isn't there. So no matter how much you want that to be the case and you believe that should be the case, like I always say, it's spectacularly inconvenient, but it is what it is. It's a brain injury, which means a lot of the neurotypical ways we want things to work, they can't. No matter how cross or frustrated you may get, they can't work. So, you know, I think that probably one of the biggest problems within our education system is the discipline and the and ultimately the consequences. But, you know, my children, well, there was an attempt to discipline the brain injury out of my children for years. But a lot of the time, before I really knew what I was dealing with, I was that as well. I was like super nanny, naughty step, reward charts. I was all of that. And getting so frustrated thinking, why? You know what's going to happen. You know that you're about to lose that last toy. Why are you doing this? And I would ask that. Like, the worst thing in the world that you could ask. Why have you just done that?
The answer is, I don't know.
Rip my own tongue out, because I realised how scared I was making my kids, because, you know, I'm meant to be in control and I'm going, why have you just done that? And they're thinking, I don't know. Like, and that must just be a really scary situation, which is when things would escalate. So, you know, when I look back, 9 times out of 10, some of the worst muddles and the worst situations we have had in our home, I've triggered them. My actions have triggered them. My voice, my language. So the person who's in charge, the adult who is in charge, has got such a massive influence, and nobody has a bigger influence than a teacher. Yeah, it's such a huge influence. But I can imagine, like, because I always used to joke before I knew what we were dealing with the diagnosis with mine, I used to joke and say, I don't know how a teacher can deal with 29 other kids and one of mine in a class. Like, I just don't know how they do it. And that still stands. Like, I think it must just be really daunting. And I think probably even a little bit more frustrating as teachers. As more information about FASD is becoming apparent and it's becoming much more available, I can only imagine as a teacher that might panic me a little bit more, thinking,
oh yeah, it's another thing to have to do.
Yes. And when you understand how prevalent it is, and when you understand the chances are you absolutely have a child in your class with this brain injury, and I think what's so unique about FASD is the impact that we can make, that we can really guide down another road of learning if we put the right kind of roadblocks in place.
Yeah, I mean, I would say when you get your class list and you get your kids with additional support needs, and you look up, you know, their IEP or whatever it is, and you see alphabet soup of diagnoses, or you see the one that used to make me laugh is needs firm boundaries. No, that's teacher speak for something completely different.
Yeah.
And you would look and you would go, holy hell, how am I going to teach this kid? And then lo and behold, the kids would walk into your class without 2 heads, and they would sit down, and they would be, okay, maybe a high octane kid, maybe a high energy kid, maybe quite a defiant kid, but they wouldn't be the devil incarnate, you know. And I think that you can teach kids with really complex needs. You know, one of my all-time favourite classes were a class composed purely of what I would call S2 boys, so year 8 for you guys, and all of them had at least 3 or 4 diagnoses, and they were absolutely bonkers. They were crazy, and I had them last thing in the day. And S2 is a terrible year anyway because the hormones are just kicking in, but we found our way. We found things that worked for us. And as a teacher, it doesn't matter the diagnosis. If there is curiosity and empathy at the heart of it, and you have your secure boundaries, it works.
Yeah.
You find a way to make it work. Now, every teacher, knowingly or not, has taught a kid who's got FASD. And they might have done a lot of things quite instinctively as practitioners that will help without knowing. So there are a few that I've taught who've definitely, I know now, got FASD. One of them must be 21, 22 now. And he had, looking back on it, the classic signs of it. But, you know, I moved him to a different seat in the classroom where he wasn't so distracted by all the auditory and the visual stimulation. And I gave him movement breaks, and I allowed him to articulate because he had to talk, you know. And I put scaffolding in place for his writing. And it's just what you pull out your toolbox as a teacher. And you think, I wonder if this works with this kid. So you can be quite daunted, I guess, when you look at that stuff to start with. But when you actually see the kid in front of you, it makes sense. It works 9 times out of 10. I'm not saying it always does, but you know, there are always kids that can't do it in a class of 30.
Yeah, and I think when you're saying that, it's like putting those things in place, so you think back and you think about this child who you absolutely know had FASD. Now you know that, but at the time you didn't even know what it was, let alone that this child had it. But you knew that where they were sitting wasn't working. You knew that they need to get off that seat and move around, so I'm going to give them a job to do. You instinctively knew these things, and actually everything you're rhyming off there would be on our kind of how-to list of what to do. So I think one of the positive things that I think about FASD, because we talk so much about neurodiverse, and so this isn't a neurodifference. Like, so there's a huge difference between FASD and autism, because FASD is a brain injury and autism is a neurodifference. So, and quite often our kids have both alongside each other for definite. But I think that the thing that excites me a little bit about FASD and about working with it and education is that, unlike a lot of other situations or diagnosis, there are some kind of fail-proof. Is that the right word? Fail-proof? No, fail-safe. Fail-safe. There are a handful of fail-safe interventions that certainly will do no harm, and chances are will really
do a lot of good.
Make a huge difference. And the thing with FASD is that those things aren't complex. They're not complicated.
They're not costly.
No, they don't cost. They're not. You've just got to get your head around it, understand what you're dealing with, and when you understand it, I believe if you do a little bit of homework about it, which I think it would be in the interest of every single teacher to do, when you understand the science and the biology of it, because it's black and white. It isn't a psychological opinion. It is black and white. It is biology. When you understand that, I just think it increases your tolerance 100-fold of any behavioural symptom that falls out from it, because it's a brain injury. It's a catastrophic brain injury. And I think when you learn about that, but I think it must be quite daunting for teachers to think, I've got to teach, I've got to know all about this as well.
But the challenge, I think, is when you have a class of 30 kids in front of you and let's say your child with FASD isn't the only child in that class who's got additional needs. And they do need regular movement breaks, or you do need to check in with them regularly, or you do need to set them 5 questions and come back and check because they can't manage 20. You know, you're spinning so many plates. Can you remember to do this? Can you remember that you need to go back and check in them then? Can you remember it's time for their movement break? You know, or to change their visual timetable or whatever, or get them to do it. And I think where things fall apart in a classroom is just because teachers have to remember and do so much. And this year, more than any other, you know, COVID has put staff stress levels through the roof. And they're dealing with stressed kids a lot of the time, stressed and anxious kids too. And quite often there's staff absences due to either vaccinations or self-isolation, and you know, they might be down PSAs, and that introduces more uncertainty for their kids that need certainty, you know.
Because even if there's a supply teacher, like I look back to when I was at school, and if you had a supply teacher for a lesson, there was always the same kid, certainly in secondary school.
Gloves off. It's fair game.
Kick off, and it would just be like, but actually when you look back now with the knowledge you've got, that was them, some of them just kids like that, but some of them, that was them in fight or flight, that was them totally dysregulated because they couldn't cope with that unplanned change. And like you say, with all the best will in the world, you know, with every single adjustment in place, COVID has just blown the best planning out of the water completely this year. So it is so difficult for teachers, and I think teachers are now dealing with children who never probably would have been on the radar for mental health difficulties, because, you know, so they would have been the children who typically would have sailed through, but COVID means that they are suffering from anxiety, when typically those kind of children probably wouldn't have suffered from anxiety. So it is such a phenomenal ask of teachers now. And I think, you know, coming up to the summer holidays and then coming back again in September, you know, you would like to think it's going to look like as close to what normal ever did back in school, but you just don't know.
I don't know. And I think what we've got here, because the three of us are immersed in a world where we're used to dealing with trauma, and we're used to dealing with triggers, and we're used to dealing with neurodiversity. The entire country has gone through 18 months of quite profound trauma. And you are now looking at in education, not only having, certainly in Scotland, we are fully inclusive. I think you pretty much are in England as well. We have very few special schools. So we have kids with very complex needs, social and emotional behavioural needs in mainstream school, big class sizes, small budget. You've got all the COVID stuff, and you've got pupils and staff who are recovering from trauma, or trying to recover, or trying to deal with trauma. And if you're talking about the fight, flight or freeze mechanism, or what I would call downstairs and upstairs brain, if I was talking to Archie, we're all inhabiting our downstairs brains a lot more than our upstairs brains. And when you're a teacher who's having to control that in themselves, as well as in the children in their classroom, it's very, very complex at the moment.
That's it. Claire, you always say, like, you know, one of the most important things that you need to do is to regulate yourself in order for your household to be regulated, in order for your children to be regulated, and that it will be, you know, the same as you were just saying, Ailsa. That's the same for the teacher. If you go in there and you're in fight, flight or freeze, and you know, you're not in a place where you're coping with the situation, then you've got a class full of 30 pupils, and you know, everything gets settled, and then the school gets closed again, or there's a school holiday, or you know, all these additional things that there's just, you know, it's a lot, isn't it?
I think like even to give an example, if I was driving, I would never be driving in the car with all three of my kids because I'm not silly. But if I was driving in the car with one or possibly two, definitely not two boys, a boy and a girl in my car, and even if I'm not verbalizing anything, but if I'm a little bit unsure of where I'm meant to be going, or if I've got to be somewhere for a time and I'm like, I'm a little bit lost, I'm not sure where I'm meant to be, just that low level anxiety of like, oh, a little bit stressed, if I'm in busy traffic and I don't know where I'm meant to be, that could trigger and shape and ruin the rest of the entire day for the kids. So it's the first time I've really thought about that. If you imagine a teacher who doesn't even know, are they going to be in the classroom next week? Is she going to be having to be preparing work to be delivering online? But then are the key worker children going to be in as well? And so our kids will be sniffing that out constantly. And that's not a criticism of teachers, because I don't want to have the functioning full stop. But that's a huge element of, and then you'll see kids kind of acting out or having challenging behaviours, and it's just they've got no control over which part of the brain they're in. They want to be out of the bottom bit, but they can't get out of the bottom bit.
Yeah. Or they hold it together and suppress it in school, and you get your meltdowns at home, which we've certainly seen a massive increase in this past little while. Yeah. But that, in actual fact, is progress for Archie, because when Archie went into P1, Archie would act out in school. He couldn't suppress, he couldn't mask. Now he can. So that's it's not a good thing for him, because obviously he feels really anxious, but it's, if you like, a skill that he's sort of learned.
To cope with life, to get through life, because whether we like it or not, that is what life will look like a lot of the time. Learning ways to cope in certain situations, and then learning techniques to let all of that out in a safe way.
But do you feel, Claire, that if your kids had diagnosis, so Archie had diagnosis by age of 5, and he had damn near killed me, but he had full-time odd hours before he went into primary 1, and he had medication just after he was in primary 1, and we had framed things, and we had to fight, but we framed things as a disability, so that the head at that time, who didn't want him in school, wanted him in a special school, had to legally take him. His head now is amazing. She's total new head, but the school has always understood Archie's differences as a brain injury, and so while staff have sometimes been quite frustrated with him, they've never been punitive. And I think that has made a huge difference to Archie's experience of school, and is
life-changing.
Yeah.
It is life-changing, and that is the importance of a diagnosis at the right time and as early as possible. It is it's life-changing. My kids' lives would be completely different. They would not look the way they do now if I hadn't had to kind of unpick it for myself over the space of nearly a decade. So you work on your way through primary school, and it's just all of these difficult behaviours and challenging behaviours, and it was a brain injury, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. If we'd all been involved in a car accident and all three of them had sustained a brain injury,
people would fall over themselves to help.
Everyone would fall over themselves to help. And that's the difference. And I think that's why I fight so hard. That's why I'm involved with the NICE quality standards, because the diagnosis at the right time is the most important thing. And it might be that there's no specific therapy put in place. It might be that medication's not needed. My children aren't medicated. It might be that not a lot of things change, but the most important thing that child needs around them is for everybody who deals with them to understand that they've got a brain injury, that they are not naughty, belligerent, difficult children, that they haven't got social, emotional, mental health problems. Those come as secondary of education crippling them emotionally. And I believe in 10 years' time we won't even be having this kind of conversation. And I'll hunt these episodes back out. We won't, because it will be a different world for FASD.
We are on the cusp of a real change, a sea change.
Yeah.
And it's a very frustrating time to be a parent and a professional, but it's also quite an exciting time, because you can see that change is coming, and that in some small way you're going to play your part in that as well, you know.
It really excites me, and then I just get crushed by a wave of sadness that my kids aren't going to benefit from it. And it excites us that I play a role in it, but then, and I wouldn't do anything else, but it does make us sad to think that they have had to suffer and are suffering for us to learn these lessons, to be able to put things in place.
But the focus at the minute is on education and early diagnosis and early intervention and everything else. There will come a day when your children benefit from living within a society who not necessarily understands FASD, but has that moment of like, pause, something's going on here with this individual, click on the empathy. I don't know their story, but let's move forward.
At least an awareness of it, like in a world where you don't have to lie and say that it's autism. You know, if you're in a situation, I don't know how many times I've had to say, like I need a little bit of help here, or my child's autistic and I've got like 5 more seconds before something happens. Can you help us with this? And simply because I knew that person would absolutely know what autism was, and it would be a social acceptance of that. So yeah, I think it's dead exciting and it's dead positive. And I know you two specifically are doing tons of work when it comes to education, and you're going to be responsible for so many teachers and education professionals understanding exactly what it is that they're dealing with and exactly how to deal with it. So it is really positive and it is really exciting. But it's a hard bloody slog as well.
It's hard. It really is. It's hard. And the other thing, although we have an early diagnosis and we have, all the professionals, good team, blah, 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 doesn't stop you worrying, Claire.
Yeah.
You said in podcast 2 or 3 episodes back that your goal was to keep your kids out of prison, or certainly the boys. It's mine. Same goal. And I felt ridiculous in his child planning meeting a couple of days ago saying, you think I'm daft, he's only 8, but you have to get this right now. You have to continue getting it right now, because education is the single most protective factor against secondary conditions. And my goal is not for him to get a clutch of A's in his hires. My goal is for him not to end up in prison. And you can see them kind of going, it's a bit of an overreaction, he's only 8. And I'm going, you don't get it. You really don't get it.
Statistics, when they look at the statistics, it's very, very real, and that has fueled me now for about 12 years, every single day, day in, day out. Because the statistics for male children they're higher than for female, and that is what absolutely fuels me. And that's why education it plays the biggest role, and I feel like education doesn't see that it plays that role yet.
Professionals say that to me, actually. A professional psychiatrist who had been treating kids with FASD in a clinic. This was in America, and it was quite early on in my PhD, and I was sort of saying, well, what are the measures? Like, because obviously it's all private in America, it's all, it's paid for anyway. And I was like, so how long do you work with kids for? Like, what are the measures? Like, how do you determine when they're done with treatment? Like, what are you working towards? And I understand it's individual, but what is it that you would typically be working towards? And he was like, to be honest with you, my biggest aim is to keep them out of prison. And that shocked me. I was like, not that far into my PhD. I hadn't had much contact with anybody with FASD. And I was like, what the heck? Like, people are paying you to treat their kids. And, my understanding of it was probably, it was very limited back then. I was like, what? That's literally it?
That's it, yeah.
But no, that is it. Like, and And I get, you know,
I wouldn't say that's it's not my only goal for him, and I guess it wouldn't be yours, Jess, for the kids you're working with, or yours for the kids you're parenting, Claire. But I mean, you have to be realistic, and I think when you parent a child like that and you see them develop, you have to keep adjusting your expectations, you know, and what can they do? Play to their strengths, you know, what do they like doing? Where are they happiest? You know, how can you set them up for the best life chances where they are to some extent sheltered and they are surrounded by people who will nurture them and who do understand them, and how can they grow and develop and be happy and successful?
That's it for anybody. I mean, God, for anybody who's just coming across this episode as their first introduction to FASD.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Go back. Like, you've come in a bit late in the story, but you know, what we're saying by that is that first and foremost, keeping them out of prison, or keeping them alive, step one. Keeping them out of prison, step two. And obviously there's loads and loads of building blocks that we're all working towards, of, you know, having a fulfilling life, having a job that they enjoy, not suffering from mental health problems. There are all these additional things, but the statistics say that unfortunately, you know, prison is a real danger, and that's a lot of why we're focusing so heavily on education. And it's not to batter the education system and saying you need to do more, you need to do this is another thing you need to learn about, blah blah blah. We're trying to help you learn about that, and as much as, you know, we're probably not in the best position right now to be saying contact us, we'll help you, but as much as we can, we're trying to help.
But the most, you know, the most important thing is what we would say is the paradigm shift, is the shift in thinking and understanding, and that costs nothing. All it really needs is a shift in mindset, and as Claire says, it's the science behind it. It is on a molecular level that alcohol messes about with the building blocks of the brain and the body, you know, and that's irrefutable scientific fact. And if you take that as your starting point and the behaviours are secondary, they're a symptom of a brain injury, then any professional working with kids in a classroom is going to have a degree of empathy and try and understand a little bit more.
And if that's the only thing that happens, that's the life-changing shift for the kids who have been taught by that individual. So that in itself can be enough, because if you're in, you know, any decent human, if they understand that, they will respond in a certain way to a fellow human, and that's sometimes all it takes. That's enough quite often.
And it so fundamentally changes the way that child feels about himself or herself. So wee guy came home from nursery when he was 3, and it is the day I decided I had to take a career break, and he said to me at bedtime, "I'm bad and I make everyone sad." And I was just like, this is not right. This is absolutely not right. I know you have behaviour problems. I know that things are tough, but you're absolutely not a bad person. And there's that, it wasn't guilt, it was shame, that shame that he felt at 3. And I was like, no. No, that this is not going to happen. You are not going to grow up thinking that about yourself. And that's what every professional in a classroom should have in their minds about any kid, let alone a kid who has a brain injury like FASD or potential brain injury. The way that you approach that child will tell them something about themselves. You know. And they are challenging, of course, they're bloody challenging. You know, and you might walk out the classroom and quietly scream or swear, but you are giving that child a message about themselves. And if you understand that they've got a brain injury, then you can support it. You know. So wee guy is now he does chance it. See, they go through this stage. They're not daft. They might have a brain injury, but they're not daft. And he'll turn around and go, no, I need more processing time for this.
Like, shut up. Just shut up from it.
No. But it's like, No. I know there's a tricky transition coming up, so I need to do X, Y, and Z. You know, and he plays it. He tries to play it, but you know, if you know him, you know when he needs more processing time, because there are tells when he'll shake his head and he'll get quite agitated because yeah, it's just like I'm doing one thing, don't tell me to do another at the same time. You know, but once he's through that stage of I've got FASD, this means I'm a little bit different and sometimes I can swing the lead. Once he gets past that and actually gets onto the stage of you're going to need to give me 10 minutes for this question instead of 5, and that's the stage I want him to get to, where he turns around and has the confidence to say, I need more time because, or I need a movement break because, you know, and to own it.
Yeah. And that's a little bit more kind than the way my daughter says it, because we're going through a little phase of having a drive for a good hour every night, and that's kind of keeping her quite regulated with a cold drink, very, very loud music. And we were on our way to get the drink before we went on the drive tonight, and I'm just kind of chattering away, and she went, "Oh, there are a lot of words coming out of your mouth into my ears now."
You could almost have heard that from somewhere, Claire. Is that not her giving you your words back?
And I actually blushed. I was like, oh, I was. She went, "You told us something about the person in that car there, then you told us something about that boy on there on that bike, and now you're talking about that dog." Right, I am. I was just so excited to be away from just have one. Like, let's speed away. But yeah, there are a lot of words coming out of your mouth into my ears.
She's hilarious.
She's the funniest person I've ever met. She just absolutely shreds me on a daily basis. So yeah, I think it's they're glorious, complex creatures. And I think you'll never ever forget teaching children with FASD. So much from them.
I can't even remember who it was, which professional it was that said it. It was somebody who knows a lot about FASD. And it was, you know, they're easy to love but hard to teach, kids with FASD. Yeah. There's something about them that is very, very lovable, very endearing. Bloody hell, they drive you mental. Yeah.
Really funny, amazing senses of humour. Really, really funny. Oh well, Ailsa, it's been lovely talking to you.
Oh, it's been lovely talking to you guys.
No doubt we'll have you on again talking about lots of different things. But we couldn't do our education season without having you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you can really hear that when you talk about teaching, it's coming from such a place of like passion. And you know, you can tell that your heart's really in it, and you took that therapeutic approach, as Claire said at the start, you know, that therapeutic approach to parenting into your classroom, and like, you know, that's what we want to spread. That's what we want to spread throughout the whole
kids education. Are fab. They're not scary. Promise.
Well, so as always, if anyone's got any questions, if any topics specifically around education that you want to either just pick our brains about or get us to talk about, then please get in touch with us on our social media, and hopefully you'll tune in again next week.
And we will try to reply as in a reasonable time frame.